Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today's class, you're going to be finishing up Gideon the Ninth and transitioning over to Harrow the Ninth. Before we go ahead and get into today's class, let's go ahead and go over our trivia question, as always. Thanks again to everyone who participated in this week's trivia question. I guess it was a harder question than I anticipated because I didn't get any correct answers this week. The question was, what show is Shadowhunters based off? What book series is the show Shadowhunters based off of? And the correct answer is Cassandra Clare's The Mortal Instruments. So I guess a lot of people haven't seen that TV series. I do highly recommend it. I do think it's a really good series and really good fantasy. So, yeah, if you haven't checked it out, I would definitely suggest it. And I do have one notable answer from Dan, because he did guess that the Shadowhunters show was based off of a series called Shadowhunters, which is a really good answer in my book because a lot of TV series do name their shows after the series of whatever book they are doing. So it was a good guess and would normally be a good answer and probably a correct answer, except in this case, they did base it more on the fact that the characters are shadow hunters in the book. And that's how they got the title instead of naming it after the series. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right in with Gideon. This ending had a whole lot going on in it. Definitely a lot going on in these last set of chapters for us to cover. So I've got a couple things I want to talk about, and then we will go ahead and transition and see where we're at from going from book 1 to book 2 so we can continue forward. Okay, so let's start with our recap as always. Right at the beginning of these set of chapters, we find that Gideon finds out that Palamedes actually was in love with Dulcinea the entire time. Like, he's been in love with her for a very, very long time, and they've written letters to each other before they even came to this place. Though they had never met in person, he was hoping to marry her. And so he then ends up confronting Dulcinea, while Gideon is trapped in his magic outside the door, listening into them. And we find out that Dulcinea is not actually Dulcinea, that instead it is Cytherea, I believe you would say that name to be. Please let me know if I'm saying that wrong. But it looks like it would be said Cytherea, who is a lictor, and just happens to have the same sickness that Dulcinea has. But she has actually ended up killing Dulcinea's cavalier. Sorry, I couldn't think of it right off the top of my head. And Dulcinea ended up dying on the way there. So she was impersonated her, and Palamedes ends up making himself into a live bomb in order to try and kill Cytherea because she killed his love. So then at the end, Cytherea ends up attacking. So she survives the bomb that goes off, and she attacks, and she lets it known that she wants to destroy all the lectors to bring back the Undying King and to kill him. So Harrow, Gideon, and Camilla are fighting Cytherea and the construct that ended up killing the 4th house. That construct was brought back again, and they end up fighting both her and the construct. And Cytherea is unfortunately winning. The entire time, they're very much struggling just to be alive and to damage her. They keep reconstructing themselves. So they're not getting much progress and end up just getting more hurt and hurt themselves. And they are actually on the verge of ready to give up, on the verge of knowing that they're going to die. Even at that short moment that Ianthe comes into the battle, she gets wiped out fairly quickly, actually. And they're all prepared to die, but Gideon ends up sacrificing herself in order to make Harrow a lector. And Harrow ends up being able to kill Cytherea. When Harrow ends up waking after this battle is over, she is in the presence of the King Undying, and she asks to bring Gideon back, which unfortunately is not possible. But she does end up agreeing to being the King Undying's lector for a short period of time. She's not sure how long that's going to be, but eventually she will go back to the Ninth. But at this point, she will be his lector and fight in this battle that he says is going on. And that is where we end the first book for this series. It was definitely a crazy set of chapters. I hope that you guys also enjoyed it and enjoyed this book in general now that we're finishing up. A lot of stuff, like last time we talked about a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of new things coming on and going on. And once again, we get a lot of things going on in these last 4 chapters, or the last 3 chapters and the epilogue. So much going on, so much anxiety, some surprises, some things that maybe weren't surprises depending on if you had guessed what was going to happen before or not. But definitely a lot of interesting things for us to talk about and delve into. Okay, so that is actually the first thing I want to talk about, is the surprises and the setup that the author gives us throughout this book. So it's very, very interesting, this kind of setup or this construction of how she planned out this book. It's very, very hard to have a book that has completely every single surprise and every single thing that's important pushed all the way to the end. It really is hard to keep, the flow of the story going and to give the reader enough that they stay interested without giving anything major away and then putting it all at the end. So this particular book does leave all of that important information and all of the actual real info that we need to understand what's going on to the very last chapters. This book had like 38 chapters and an epilogue, I believe. I'm pretty sure 37, 38 chapters and an epilogue. And literally the last 8 chapters are where everything going on happens. Like everything that's really what you need to know, all the big stuff happens in those last 8 chapters. So we're spending this whole time wondering, and we get enough information from the author to go through the story, be interested, but not enough that we actually know anything, and then she just springs it all on in a succession, meaning like, one thing that leads to another thing, then we leads to another thing, and then finally we got all this information wrapped up into one little bundle, and that leads us to being able to have this giant climax and this giant battle, and to end where we end up. So I give props to the author, especially to be able to lead us this far into this story and have this much of a story to progress through it before getting us into the real meat of things, and to be able to keep all those secrets pressed to the end. Not only that, but then you must also have a big enough of a reveal of something in order to do this kind of major boom at the end. So the author had to completely plan out where she wanted this to go in order for this reveal to happen. Because if not, she would not have planned so much progression to be made without all this knowledge. She had to know what knowledge she was going to be bringing at the end in order to really shock us, in order to really ramp up the suspension and ramp up what needed to take place in order for us to get this big shock value at the end. So a whole lot of planning, a whole lot of knowledge on her part of where she wanted this story to go and how it needed to explode in order to make this big of a dramatic effect. And so definitely give a lot of props on that, how all of this information she planned to have at the end, and how she could make the earlier portions work out so that way it would make the most impact. And really everything in this story was leading up to this point. There is no time when you feel like, okay, that didn't quite add up. That didn't lead us to this moment. Everything did lead us to this moment. We just didn't know it was going to be left to this moment. So the author really, really did a great job building this story, building this world, and doing it in a way that kept everything that was really of value secret from the audience, even though we didn't realize that all these things were being kept secret and all of this was going to be revealed at the end. The book is really only setting up a base to lead to the second book, at least in my opinion. I feel like this book really feels like it is a setup or a prelude to what is more important, and that is going to be happening in book 2, book 3, and beyond. So very, very interesting way of going about it, of making this book the pre-story to what is going to be probably the meat of what's going on in this world. So we've had this little interesting origin story for Harrow, and now that we have Harrow here, then we're going to progress to what is important and where Harrow is going to be going and what the whole world is going through that we just didn't know about at this point. So very super interesting the way that the author decided to make this story, to set it up, as well as the bigger whole story with the multiple books. She's making this overarching thing that progressed really slowly through book 1, ends on a bang, and sets us up completely for moving forward into more dramatic, more big time events. So super, super interesting. I don't find that there's many book series or many books in general that are set up in this way, and so I really enjoyed the uniqueness of how much was done in order to set us up at this point. I would love to know how you felt about it, if you like that everything was at the end, if you wish you'd had more of this information sooner, how you feel about whether we're just setting things up to happen to the real events, or if you think this was also a really big important event, with how Harrow now being a lector. So let's just go ahead a little bit and list the little bit of surprises that we do end on. The first thing was that Palamedes was in love with Dulcinea, which we never, at least me, I never would have in a million years suspected that. Dulcinea, or the fake Dulcinea, never gave any hint to that being the case, obviously, since she probably didn't know. And then 2, Palamedes, it didn't seem like he really even knew her very much. It was very unique. I mean, he did interact with her, but it didn't seem like somebody who was like head over heels in love with that person. And it makes us wonder, the author still didn't get this as an answer for us, is how long did Palamedes know that Dulcinea was not the real Dulcinea? Did he just suddenly know this? Did he just guess? Did she not act enough about how he expected? So how long exactly did this occur? He did mention that he should have talked to her from the beginning and would have realized then sooner, but he didn't. So then when did he exactly learn or figure out the fact that she was not who she was saying she was? We learn that Dulcinea is not actually Dulcinea, as we've mentioned, that she was actually a lictor, that was an imposter, and that she wants to destroy the King Undying, and that is why she has come and is doing all of these things and killing off everybody, which also leads us to finding out that she is the one that's actually been killing everybody. The one person we thought probably would not be the case because she is sick and very much not able to do a lot of things. She lost her cavalier and everything like that, so we're thinking she's been bedridden for a while now, and really she was the one that's planning to kill everybody. Some people killed each other for themselves, but really she was the one that planned the murders and was doing everything behind the scenes. So very, very interesting there. And then we end on the fact that Gideon is willing to die, and does die, in order to make Harrow a lector, and that she does become a lector, and that is a surprise that that's how a person becomes a lector. It did not seem like that was going to be the case, even at the end with the Anth absorbing her own cavalier. everyone was assumed like that doesn't make you actually a lector. They were like, I don't know what you are, but you're not a lector. But really, that is the case, that was the last step, was being able to connect enough with your cavalier to bind yourself together and become one. Though apparently Ian's cavalier is becoming not so quietly and mixing with her not so well, which is very, very interesting indeed. So a lot of big surprises, a lot of things that we learn about this world, the way it works, and the characters that have been here this whole time. Definitely very interesting. We did always know that Dulcinea was kind of more of a prominent character. She always was very interesting, had a lot of interest in Gideon, had a lot of time with Gideon visiting her, doing stuff for her. Very, very interesting. And so we felt like she was going to be somebody that was going to do something. But never in a million years, at least for me, did I suspect that she was a lector in disguise. I would love to know what surprises that came even in the last set of chapters as well, not just this set, but any surprises that have been revealed, the big reveals that you guessed beforehand or that you didn't guess. I would really love to know what surprised you and what didn't, if everything surprised you or if hardly anything surprised you. I'd love to know exactly your thoughts and how you came to those conclusions. Because for me, I felt very surprised throughout most of the end of this book. There's only one thing that I suspected was going to happen, and that was that Gideon was going to sacrifice herself to Harrow so she could become a lector. I guessed that very quickly, especially once they were losing the battle and was not going to be getting out. That was something that I pretty much guessed, was that at some point in these chapters Gideon was going to do that. I was just hoping that wasn't the way that you would become a lector, but then once it was confirmed that equals lectorhood, I was like, Gideon's not surviving this, unfortunately. And it doesn't totally surprise me that she gave herself to Harrow either. I thought possibly it could be that Harrow was going to ask her to do it and she was going to do it, but Harrow didn't even ask, which was not a surprise, kind of a surprise. It just, by the situation, it wasn't a surprise. But I did think that Harrow might have asked her or demanded that she do that for her. And yeah, so I did expect that particular one. Alright, so now let's go ahead and talk about some character arcs. I want to talk about our two main characters and their character arcs through this book. So of course, let's go ahead and start with Gideon. It seems that we have her move forward from her blind anger at Harrow. So at the beginning, she very much has a blind anger, just hates her, hates the Ninth, hates everything. Wants to escape her life. She no longer wants to really escape Harrow as we progress through. She doesn't want to escape. She doesn't have the feelings that she had before where she's just angry and despising her all the time. She moves into being, she even moves away from her being too nice, because at the beginning, even though she had that blind anger, she was just too nice to Harrow anyway. She was very giving, very much caring about Harrow despite the anger. And she ends up being more self-assertive. She, stands up to her, especially when talking about Dulcinea and stuff like that. She completely snaps at her, throws all the goodwill that they were building together out the window. So she becomes much more self-assertive and strong in that sense, not just blindly being nice to Harrow. And she progresses then to fully forgiving Harrow once she has a entire view about what's going on with Harrow and Harrow's birth and everything that was happening at the Ninth. Completely moves forward to being able to forgive Harrow, and decides that she is dedicating her whole life to Harrow, and that leads to her sacrificing herself for Harrow. So we do see the progression in her relationship with Harrow and how she progresses as a character based on her relationship with Harrow and how that progression goes. But it feels like minimal change to her actual character. It still feels like Gideon is Gideon through the whole way. She's still sarcastic. She's still very much a person that pushes back. So even though she forgives Harrow and she's trying to build something with Harrow, and even as she learns to stand up to Harrow, it's all still like a kind of like a defying authority kind of way. She really likes to make sarcastic comments. She likes to be snarky. She is very nice and very kind, but she still has her doubts. She even had her doubts about Harrow and whether she was the one murdering everybody and stuff like that. But she is constantly Gideon. I don't feel like she made like a big character change in like who she is or how she deals with situations or what kind of choices she would make. It's more about her progression with her and her evolving her relationship with Harrow and through Harrow the Ninth. She's just a character that's kind of all over the place a little bit in how she handles situations and what she thinks about different people, in what she trusts, who she doesn't trust. So she is a little bit all over the place, but she doesn't make any drastic changes. She is her to the end. And I feel like the Gideon that we had at the start is very much the Gideon that we had at the end. It just is different based on her relationship with Harrow and the relationships that she had with the people at the first that then changes her decision making. So it's the relationships that changed and not necessarily her personality or how she would handle things. But the thing is that I kind of find it a little bit of an interesting character arc, or a little bit of a relationship arc, as you might say. Because I find it a little hard to be believable at the end here. Maybe this is just my personal feelings getting in the way of what I would like to happen, and that is why I felt this way, but I felt a little bittersweet at the end. I did want the progression of, especially after hearing who Harrow really is and having that new perspective of her, I wanted them to be close and I wanted them to be partners. But do I really believe that Gideon's whole life is meant to be Harrow? Like, I know that she stayed a lot. I know that she didn't end up escaping from the Ninth. But a lot of that was more forced on her. That was not her true dream. I mean, she had such a dream to go and be in the army. And that was her whole reason for sticking with Harrow through this lector training session or whatever, because she was hoping to become part of the army and finally escape the Ninth. Now, I can understand her not wanting necessarily to escape Harrow anymore and being more friends with her. I felt like that did progress enough for that. But do I feel like that we've really progressed enough for her to make the decision to give up her life and to become literally a part of Harrow so that way she could become a lector, to save her in that way, and for her to even do that salute to the Ninth at the end? I'm not sure. With all that hatred and all that hurt that happened for most of their lives, how can she truly fully forgive her enough to do that? It's a bit hard for me to swallow. I get why it happened. I get that that was the progression that ended up needing to happen in order for Harrow to become a lector. But I was really hoping that maybe there would be some kind of different path in order for them to still be a top team without needing the lectorhood, possibly. Though, in the end, as I mentioned before, that was kind of expected, was that at some point Harrow was going to become a lector. And once confirmed that Gideon was going to have to die in order for that to happen, I kind of knew that was going to happen. I just don't feel like the way it happened totally fit Gideon's character or the relationship that they had progressed to. I just don't feel like the hatred should have gone away quite good enough for her to make that decision. Though, based on the way the author read it, they were going to die either way, and she gave Harrow the chance to live by dying. And that was the only way that any of them would live. But yeah, like I said, I just feel like the reasoning that she does it is because her whole life is Harrow, because she wants Harrow to live, because she finally makes peace with the Ninth and does a whole salute for the Ninth kind of thing. Just doesn't seem in character to me. Doesn't seem like the progression that we had made. But I'd love to know your opinion on that, whether you thought her character arc was consistent, whether you approve of that choice or not, whether you saw it coming or not. Let me know. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts. And now let's progress to Harrow. Harrow changes to our perspective. She doesn't necessarily completely change. Her big character arc does not necessarily have the progression that changes because she changes as a person, though I do think she does change some as a person from these events. But the biggest change that we have is from a reader perspective. So my perspective of Harrow changes, and many people, I'm assuming, changed their perspective of Harrow once they understood the background, once they understood that her parents killed 200 kids in order to make her live. When you find out that she's wanted to commit suicide several times because she can't cope with the fact that she has these 200 deaths on her conscience. That she has entered that locked tomb and what's behind it, and her motivation for wanting to find out who that enemy is. So much has changed in the fact that, her hatred is not of Gideon, who she feels killed her parents, because she really knows that that's not the case. Her parents made their own decisions. She just took it out on Gideon because she didn't know how else to deal with all of it. Her parents' lives, the 200 children's lives, all of it, and she's just a little kid. She's only 10, at this point when she knew about that, when her parents died and everything. So she's had a lot of problems in her life, and it started from before she was even born, and she's had to carry that weight. So the reader perspective makes everything that Gideon has done a different kind of perspective. So that's the biggest change that we have first, is that we realize her motivations and her reasoning and who she actually is different than the way we have perceived her. The second change then becomes more of her vulnerability and the selflessness that she has towards Gideon. So from all of these events, from the people that she's met, the people that she's worked with, like Palamedes and Camilla, she has learned to connect with people better. She's learned to be less defensive. She learns to be more vulnerable, to be a partner with Gideon instead of being enemies with Gideon. She learns that, she really loves Gideon and she wants to have Gideon in her life. Especially once she's gone and absorbed into her, we really see that she is like, no, I would not have asked this of Gideon. I would not have become a lector if it meant killing her and there was no other choice. She begs for her life back. And unfortunately, that's not being able to give to her, and she is a little bit lost without Gideon, which is why she has that mental image of her in her head, hoping that she can try and keep her alive in some way. So, Harrow, I think, progresses a lot more in this book, not only because of our perspective. I do think that she actually changes. She actually becomes much more of a caring person. She becomes much more of a vulnerable person and a trusting person. Don't think she would have become a lector at all. I think maybe in the beginning she might have become a lector and given up Gideon because she felt like that was the only choice that she had. But I think by the end we realized that she wouldn't have, and I do think that is a change on her part. And it feels very natural. This one feels much more natural to me than the progression we had with Gideon. That really she's had these feelings her whole life. Really, she's just dealing with them, and she actually realizes that she can connect with Gideon as a friend, and that is a better way to connect with her, that she can find other people that she can connect with and that will still care about her despite all the hurt and the pain that her life has been created from. So I think that was very important for her, is to feel that kindness from Gideon, to feel that kindness from, Palamedes, who worked with her and, trusted her and knew that she didn't kill anybody. So I think that the people that she met here really helped change her and smooth her progression into who she becomes. Okay, so I do want to do a little bit of a transition between book 1 and book 2 and kind of talk about where we're going and what's been set up for book 2. So something that I've noticed, especially because, we've had all of these things happening and we have all these questions and everything's building up to the end where we have all these big reveals. We actually do leave a lot of questions open at the end of this book. We have tons of different things that, at least for me, that I'm like, okay, well, what about this? What about this? We didn't get the answer to that. I'm questioning this. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about my questions that we're going to be carrying over into book too. And maybe there are questions that you have as well. If you have anything that I didn't mention, I would love to hear what other questions you are still juggling with and wanting to know in book 2. The first one is something that I've noticed, especially at the end here, is that we don't really understand how magic really works, or the necromancy really works in this particular world, in this particular book series. We have a little bit of, the details of like Fanergy and stuff like that, but we don't truly understand how it works, why people are born with it or not born with it, obviously we know that, Harrow was guaranteed to be a necromancer based on all these deaths, but how does this really work? What happens on the necromancer's side that triggers this magic, and how is it different in different people and all that kind of stuff? I think it'd be interesting to know a little bit more detailed explanation of how necromancy works, maybe its origin, whether there's this in this particular novel, everybody, like from way back from the beginning of history, everyone's been able to do that, if it's kind of a newer development or came to be about it from the King Undying. Just a little bit more knowledge about actually how magic works would be helpful, I believe, for me, and it would make this world building even more full and complete and interesting. So that's something I would like to carry over, especially now it seems that we're going to have Harrow as our main character, that will maybe be able to be answered. Another question is, why does absorbing another person, your cavalier in particular, grant you long life? Because I get the point of, like, the lector is somebody that can fight because they have that energy from their cavalier. That's somebody who can fight very, very well, and their whole life is training to fight and stuff like that. But how is it that one soul plus one soul equals like forever life? I just don't totally understand that part. How is that actually what grants you this immortality-based thing? I'm not quite sure about that. I think that's very, very interesting, and hopefully we'll find out more information about that. The next thing is that we have bodies missing. Gideon is missing, her body at least. We've got a couple other people, like Camilla, I believe they said was missing, and a couple others whose bodies they could not find. Camilla was supposed to be alive, so where did she go? What happened? Who took them? Because there wasn't supposed to be anybody else on that planet. So it's very interesting about these missing bodies and missing people and what that means in the scheme of things. Like, obviously that was mentioned for a reason, and what's going to move forward from that. Does that also mean that possibly Gideon might be able to come back because this person took the body? We're going to find out on that. But that can just lead to lots more questions. More questions upon more questions. So just more like, what's going on with the missing bodies is a good, solid question. And what is really going on with the King Undying? We've met him for a brief moment. Didn't seem like what I expected of this king that's not supposed to be coming back, though I'm not totally sure what I would have expected. Obviously, he didn't get as many lectors as he was hoping to get, I'm sure, to fill the spots, but we still don't know why he has an enemy that's locked up in the Ninth. We don't know why he isn't able to come back, except he says something about the world not being saved for him, but what does that really mean? And what will happen if he does come back? What kind of fight is he fighting right now that he needs lectors for, that he needs specifically Harrow for? What is the deal with the King Undying, and what bigger thing is going on in this universe? That is something that we are going to have to find out. And also, we never really realized who Gideon was. Why did she not die from that poisonous gas that was supposed to kill everybody? Where did she actually come from? We never even really understand who Gideon was before she's gone. Do we even ever find out who Gideon really was, and all the questions that we had that were still related to her? I mean, there was a previous Gideon on that flimsy mention of the name Gideon, and Cytherea did mention that she once knew another Gideon. But what does that have anything to do? Why did we add that in? Is my question. Is, you know, we kind of put a lot more emphasis on this idea of a past Gideon. And what does that mean now? Because Gideon's not even around anymore. She's been absorbed by Harrow. So why put all this information about a previous Gideon and we not even have any idea of what that meant for the nowadays Gideon who is now gone? So lots of different things that we're being left with as far as questions that haven't been answered or questions that have been thrown in at the end that is going to lead us into book 2. So a lot of different things to look forward to, hopefully in this next book, and to see if those kind of things are cleared up. And the second main thing that we're transitioning from book 1 to book 2 with is we are no longer having Gideon as our main character. We're having Harrow as our main character, especially as it's called Harrow the Ninth. So Gideon was our main character in this particular one, and we make the most, or at least I have made the most connections with Gideon. Not with Harrow, not with anybody else. Harrow, I spent most of the book thinking she wasn't that good. Like, I mean, not that I hated her, but I also didn't like her. And though we get all these, you know, new information about her, and it makes me like her better, it makes me find her very interesting, a very fascinating character. But I didn't really have a connection to her, not the way I had a connection with Gideon. And Gideon is also a kind of character that I really like. I really like snarky characters, really like those characters that will make digs when they shouldn't be making digs, and are just very bold, brave characters. And Harrow is somebody that I haven't known enough in a good light to make a connection to her. So will that hinder the next book, or will it help the next book? It's hard to say, because depending on if you like Harrow or not, that could affect whether you want to read the next book or not, knowing that Harrow is going to be that main character. So connection with her is really important, and maybe we will be able to make more of a connection with her in this next book. But I think it is a little disappointing that Gideon is gone, and we're going to find out how that affects the next book. And now, last but not least, I have 2 different things for our Nitty Gritty section. And of course, as always, these are just things that are interesting or to keep in mind as we move forward. So 2 things that really caught my eye was the ending battle and conflict in this ending. Seemed like a really insurmountable boss mode, like from a video game. I don't know if that felt that way to you guys, but it felt like it was basically an undefeatable boss that then was defeated because of these 1 conditions that were met, which is that Gideon is like the best fighter ever, and that Harrow is like the most amazing necromancer, and they combined together to become a lector and defeated the big bad boss. Felt very much like there was going to be a hard way to actually make it believable to defeat Cytherea. And it makes me do wonder how we're going to move forward from this particular boss to another battle, especially with it being that the King Undying is fighting some kind of war and needs lectors to be able to fight that war. Is if this was already such a hard-won battle, how are we going to progress forward to harder, more imposing type things, whatever the kind of battle that they are doing at this moment? We don't know enough information about that. But I just think that's very interesting, and I felt like a lot of the time when I was reading this battle, like, how are they going to make it believable after all this stuff that doesn't work, that it's gonna end up being killing her? Like, it just seemed like an almost impossible thing. I do think overall it was a believable ending to the battle, since it was something that was set up from Palamedes in the beginning, but it just felt like the whole time a little bit like a Dark Souls boss where you have to die 20 times before you can actually defeat the boss. So just felt that was a little bit of questioning of that, and a little questioning of where we're going to be moving forward to from there. And second was that I think we should keep in mind the concept that Cytherea made this pronouncement, that she was coming from the vengeance of the 10 billion. I think that is a very interesting statement that I don't know if we need to question or not. I don't know what the 10 billion is or what that means, but she made this very particular comment about it. And I think we should keep that comment in mind and see if there's anything that builds from that. So that's what I've got for the ending of Gideon the Ninth. Hopefully you enjoyed the book. I have definitely enjoyed it, and we will see what happens when we move to book 2 and how things progress from there. Okay, so if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything you want to say, anything at all, please let me know. You can comment down below. If that is not the best place for you, you can also find me on Twitter, which is at fantasyfiction1. You can also find me on Facebook, which is /fantasyfiction1. You are welcome to also contact me through the Discord. So we do have a Fantasy Fiction Fanatics Discord. The link for your invite will be down below if you wish to join. We already have quite a few people over there chatting and talking about different things, fantasy related, not fantasy related, just anything at all, just having a good time talking and chatting over there. And of course I am on there as well if you'd like to get a hold of me. So lots of different places to go ahead and go. You can also check out more content from me on my blog, fantasyfictionfanatics.net. You can contact me through the contact form on there as well, but on there I've got tons of different topics on there, recommendations, book reviews, book insights. I've got suggestions for you based on what you might want to read. I've got different topics about fantasy that I discuss on there as well. So lots of different things to go ahead and check out if you're interested over there. And I think that is it for today. I will see you guys in the next class. Bye.